joining us. This is live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller. We have two very special guests today. Vicki Lopez, State Representative, District 113, and my beautiful wife, Susan Miller,
43 years.
43 years.
Congrats.
So let's talk about the Tristan Murphy Act.
Yes.
Right. Let's talk about that, what it means and how it all got done.
So, I've been a real proponent and supporter of mental health services, both mental health and substance use disorders. And this was a story that we heard, not this year, but the year before. So we were ripe for doing something right about people who have mental health issues and find themselves in the correctional settings. Tristan, unfortunately, the tragedy of Tristan and his family is that Tristan didn't belong in prison. Tristan had severe mental illness and should have gotten help that sometimes and oftentimes is not provided in a correctional setting. And Tristan just, when he got arrested, really honestly began a downward decline in not only his mental health, but in his physical health. Everything just fell apart for him, and he ended up passing away as a result of that. And I think Tristan's family, the tragedy, like most tragedy that befalls people, begin to advocate for big change so that it doesn't happen to anybody else. And so there has always been this movement in the Florida legislature to put emphasis on mental health treatment. And I think the fact that this happened in a correctional setting was another expansion of that support for mental health services. So the act wasn't really difficult to pass, to be honest with you. I mean, when you hear Tristan's parents tell the story, and I always say, I could tell that story for you and it wouldn't have not even half of the impact that Tristan's parents telling the story had. So I think people felt very badly because it was such a compelling story about how we had failed Tristan in the system. And so I don't find that those kind of laws that get passed require too much work, because the parents or the victims or whoever has been negatively impacted by a situation.
And it's such an
tell
obvious.
Oh, it was so obvious.
Yeah.
It was so obvious that we failed him.
Yeah.
We really
So,
did.
so what are some of the things that are going to come out of that?
So I think what you're going to see come out of it is better assessments on the front end. I think Tristan would have been better served in potentially a lockdown facility like a mental health hospital, right? A behavioral health hospital. So you'll see assessments determine whether or not they belong either in a correctional setting or is it so severe that he should have been in a more behavioral health setting, right? And we have those facilities. So I think assessments are important at the front end. I also think that sometimes people come into the system and you don't see it right away. So the ongoing assessments that will take place as a result of this law, I think, are going to really change the face for those that start to decompensate while they're in a correctional setting.
Alex Pinellas, former mayor of Miami-Dade County years ago, spoke at one of our events a couple of years ago, and he spoke about his brother who had severe mental illness. And the mayor said, there I was, I had the bully pulpit, right? And I didn't know what to do with my brother. Living on the street, he was afraid to have him come to the house because of the kids. And eventually he did die. I don't know if it was suicide, but there was something that was not supposed to happen. And so it made me start thinking about mental illness. And I look back at Michael Phelps, who years ago said, I got a problem. Simone Biles says, I got a problem. Then there's mental health days. And so it's sort of coming out of the closet, but not quite where it needs to be. And we've spoken to many times to the folks from NAMI. Susan Rachel was here. And she said, my son, who had a breakdown years ago, would like to come in and sing. It's okay. So he comes in, and his name is Matt. I said, Matt, we're going to ask you some questions. You want to answer them? Great. If you don't want to. He said, no, I just want to sing. So he sat where Susan is, took out his guitar, and started singing, You're Not Alone. Oh, his mother's here. She's crying. I'm crying. I'm imagining him walking down Biscayne Boulevard, no shirt and no shoes. At some point, I'm sure that's what happened. And now he's very much involved. He got his master's degree, and now he's very much involved in helping people. So we realize if we lend a helping hand, that many things can be done to diagnose and to help. April was Autism Awareness Month. We
Yes.
had a lot of guests on who talked about autism. Can you tell us about your experience with it and what the state's done and what you can do personally?
Yeah, so, we've been very fortunate in the Florida House that our speaker, Danny Perez, has been very vocal about the fact that his brother had severe autism as well, and how it impacted the family and how it impacted him personally. So his leadership has really, I think, lifted not only autism, but any person who has unique abilities, right? Having a sensitivity towards it and making sure that they get off the waiting list. I think the real problem that we're seeing is people with autism. There's a spectrum, obviously, and in many families, there's more than one who has an autistic diagnosis. So they need assistance. And what I'm finding in my work is that oftentimes it's difficult to get the help that they need. And that should not be, because it isn't as if these people are not, people with autism often are very bright and can make huge contributions in our community. But when they're little and their parents are seeking help, it is hard to find. And then it is hard to get help from the government. And that's what we found just recently in our budget work this year. We put so much money into persons with disabilities because what we were finding was there were so many people that were on a waiting list. And I don't see any reason why that should even exist. We have lots of money for lots of things, right? If we choose to spend it correctly and with the highest priority. And we made people with autism and any other disability our highest priority this session.
That's wonderful. You might remember that during the pandemic, there was a woman who had an autistic child. She was walking along the canal, threw the baby into the canal.
Yep.
A passerby saw the baby trying in the water. He went and he saved the baby, gave it back to the mother, not knowing she was the one that put him in the water. And 2 blocks later, she threw him in the. So
I just want to say also that we have hired people with autism, and the best employees are the people with autism. And I was wondering what's going on with the hiring of people that are on the spectrum, but not severe.
Yes.
Is there anything being done?
I don't know that there's anything specifically being done with that, Susan, but I think we have to encourage people to take a risk.
I think
right?
employees
I agree.
should know that these people are very intelligent. They can do the work above and beyond and are very employable.
So
they are very, and I will say this about it. So we did pass a law because what we found also, we have a member of the Florida House, Representative Allison Tant from the Tallahassee area, and she has an autistic child, and she ran a bill where when you get stopped by a police officer, that makes people with autism incredibly nervous, and they may act out that is misinterpreted by law enforcement officers. So her bill was, we need to learn to train law enforcement officers and to put like maybe a small little, I think it was like a decal that allows people to know, okay, in this vehicle, there may be someone with autism. So know the signs, treat them accordingly, because they were arresting people with autism, which, just because that they acted out in some fashion, which is all part of how they would have responded to maybe a fearful situation. So the more we do that, and the more that we encourage businesses, I think businesses like yourself that do hire them, I always think about roundtables. We've done this with ex-offenders, people that come home from jail. They're some of the best workers as well. And we like to put employers on one side of the table that have hired them to talk to those on the other side of the table that are reticent to hiring them so that they can share their experiences. It makes a big difference.
So when Miami-Dade County Commissioner Brickell, a lot of us here, she said they deserve a seat at the table. And we've certainly taken that to heart. In my experience with knowing only one autistic child, the reality is I've seen the others but couldn't quite figure it out. I get a guy comes and visits me. He says, my son has autism. Do you have any internships? Happened to be a customer. I was really feeling the pressure. And the only thing I could relate back to was Steve Bateman's son, Austin. When Austin was very little, he was sitting in a chair, rocking back and forth, screaming, Austin, change your diaper. Austin, change your diaper. So that's what I'm thinking when the father's here. So the father shows me this video, and I'm thinking, don't lean over to look at it because it's not relevant there. And I'm saying that to myself, and I said, to the gentleman. I said, "Listen, you're saving lives, so we're gonna give your son this." I
Oh.
said, "It's gonna be 3 days, 4 hours a day. That's it," because I could feel this huge pressure,
I bet.
mostly because I just didn't know. Well, after an hour, I offered him a job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
His
Wow.
parents both called me, crying, so happy, and the next day he said, "I want it." He's been here 2.5 years.
He's one of our best employees.
Right?
We have to bust
Yeah.
the myth, though, right?
Yes.
Because we all,
Yes.
listen, we're all guilty of having somehow preconceived notions about who people are, generally speaking, when in fact, not any of us is not the same, right?
Yes.
Even those of us
Right.
that don't have autism, right?
Right.
So for me, it's a function of always making sure that people get a chance.
And
It's important to me.
That's what I hope
Mhm,
people
mhm.
do, because I was so hesitant. But we're all on a spectrum.
We
Yeah,
are. We
we
most
are.
likely are.
Spectrum.
Listen, I've been accused of being OCD, a perfectionist. I mean, you name it, and that's part of what I have to struggle with, right? We're all
Mhm.
struggling with something.
So
Yeah.
we had some folks over here. We had one of the folks that works at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders from the University of Miami. We had Robbie Yossi Harlick with the Friendship Circle. We had the folks from Miracle League.
Mhm.
And who walks in the door? And that was unannounced that was going to be the subject. This guy who's wearing a hat. It says Autism Dad. His name is Victor. And I said, "Victor, come here. You're going to talk to these people." I had probably brought him to 5 events to get him to talk about it. He now has a show here frequently. And he brings in people, the parents who have, in many cases, both kids autistic.
Yeah, what is up with that?
I don't know, because even Commissioner Regalado, she has 2 children, and both of them have,
Yes.
I think, are on the spectrum. And I remember going to the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce breakfast, and they were focusing on autism. And a mother got up there, and she has 4 children, of which all have that, and 2 are nonverbal. Right. So
Wow.
when you hear those kind of stories, you want to do everything you can, because what we forget is that we are focused on the child, but the caregiver, which
Yes.
is the parent,
Yeah.
is carrying a huge load.
In-
Huge.
In
Yeah.
Friendship Circle, they have a place for the
Yes,
parents. to sit around.
thankfully,
Mhm.
thankfully.
Yes.
Mhm.
And we now have a show for autismspeaks.org. Cindy, Candy Spitz, heading it up. She had twins. They were perfect. Big job, big house, big husband.
Yeah. Always perfect.
Okay. And then at 17 and a half months, both children became nonverbal.
Wow.
At the
the same
same time.
Because
Yes.
they were
it's-
twins.
Right.
Well,
At the same
yeah.
How crazy
same
is
time.
that?
And she said publicly, all right, this is all public information. She's, "My job is get them to transition into adulthood." That's her
Correct.
job. Used to be big house, big job. No, her job is, I happened to see her yesterday. It's when people like that can speak up that gives hope to the parents of these. And
Absolutely.
we see the
Mhm.
stress. Remember, with COVID, you had the kids and you had the parents. Right?
Correct.
Thank God we get to get out of the house and go talk with other folks. So let's move on to some other things if we could.
Yeah, of course.
The live work local.
Yes.
Work
Live local.
Okay, so a couple of years ago, some things were passed. Some of the cities and counties said, "Oh, we don't want the state interfering with our stuff."
Yep.
But you went back again last year, I think.
Yep.
And there were some changes that were made to that. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So, I'm a strong proponent of housing. And I believe that everyone needs housing. And since the pandemic in Florida, we have seen an increase in the unaffordability of housing, right? People are leaving. And what concerns me most is the young people here who have been born here, educated here, are having to leave Florida because they can't afford to live here. So we have sort of a brain drain going on as well. But we also have, retirees that no longer can afford to live here either, where they thought this was going to be home for the rest of the remaining part of their life. So for many reasons, and I know the pandemic exacerbated this affordability issue. And what happened was that those of us who live here can no longer afford to live here because people were coming in droves from New York, LA, San Francisco, Philly, Chicago, and I live in an 800 square foot condominium, which I've started paying $1,800 for. Today I pay $3,150. You have to ask yourself why. Well, how could they charge that? You know why? Because a person coming from New York that was in an 800 square foot condo was paying $9,000 a month. So they came and said, oh my gosh, this is a steal, I'll offer. So there were bidding wars going on, both for sale of homes and for rentals across the state. So we all know, I don't think there's anyone here that can say we don't have a problem. We all are convinced we have a problem, but oftentimes local governments across the state have been our biggest challenge. They don't understand that I need housing yesterday. And to build, let's say to build a 12-story condominium building or apartment building is going to take at least 3.5 years. If you continue to put challenges or obstructions to that being done, shovels in the ground yesterday, we're never gonna solve this problem. So yes, we came back this year. This is the third year that we've had to put more transparency, clarify issues, because remember that, we only worry about Miami-Dade County here because that's what we do. But when I have to legislate for 67 counties across the state. So in many ways, there are many different interpretations of the law. So this year we said, look, let us define terms. Mm-hmm. Commercial means this. I know for me, commercial meant anything that isn't residential. But no, you would be shocked at the number of definitions that came throughout the state because they were trying to get around the live local. So being the cities. They being the cities and counties. Mm-hmm. Now, in many cases, like here in our community, for instance, today is Thursday, the city of Miami is getting ready today. There's an item on their agenda to redo their zoning, requirements. They're going to require more density. They're going to remove some obstructions like parking requirements. So look, they're a good actor, I say, because I saw the legislation and I thought, yes, that's what we need to do to get more housing built. But we had to come back and really define terms, tell them, no, the law passed and went into effect on July 1st of 2023. Nothing that you did to try to get around that law is valid. So we had to put kind of a heavy hand, which, look, every one of us understands this home rule notion, right? We want people to be able to rule their own cities and counties. But when you have that kind of a crisis, that crisis is statewide, sometimes the state just has to intercede. And that is what we've done.
But let me ask you something. There's so many different levels to this, because when you talk about transportation, for example, they're not what do you call it? Having the parking included in, 1 or 2 parking spaces. So then you're talking about transportation, and then you have to increase your transportation.
Yep.
So it just goes on and on. So it gets very complicated.
It's even more complicated because the law only focuses on the housing.
Right.
It does not focus on all the infrastructure needs surrounding it, right?
Right.
Roads, sewer, the impacts, as we call it, right? Mm-hmm. If you build 800 units and you're going to have 800 people. Now, granted, nowadays, many of our young folks don't even have cars. They're really into the ride share or public transportation, but they may have one car. A couple may have one car or none. The point is more traffic. You see, we complain every day about traffic. And yet the more housing we build, obviously more pressure on the infrastructure.
Correct.
So it isn't simple. It is complex. And yet the law only focuses on the housing units, and it leaves the local governments to have to worry about the impacts. And that is one obvious negative of the live local.
Right.
So in Miami-Dade County, there's over 100,000 septic tanks, a lot of them on the east side, I think in your area as well. I know that there are around 8,000 or 9,000 that are in critical condition. What can the state do to expedite these changes that need to be made?
Funding, and we have been funding. For us, the important part here is the septic to sewer transition, right? I mean, and you'd be surprised in my district, a lot has already been done. Like on Key Biscayne is one of my districts. Thankfully, on a barrier island like that, they've taken care of it. Gratefully, because that would be an environmental nightmare. And for those that couldn't afford it, they stepped in and helped, which is good, right? Local governments have, in fact, at least Miami-Dade has, really prioritized this. The county has certainly prioritized this. So partnerships between the state funding and the county funding, and then ensuring that it gets done, right? So you sort of have a work plan. you say this area, we're going to start here and we're just going to keep moving. It's incredibly expensive.
How much
That's the
is it
problem.
per septic tank to transition?
You know that I don't know that, but I do know that it's expensive because
Yes.
every time we talk about numbers, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
So the streets have to be ready. The pipes have
Yes.
to be ready to take it off there.
Correct.
And put
And
it
the
there.
homeowners have to come up with this money
It's a bunch.
and then go on
Absolutely.
a payment plan because
Yes.
it's so expensive.
No, this is not, again, another complicated issue,
Right.
but that is, it's so mandatory for me because it's an environmental nightmare.
Yeah.
It can be. And left to their own devices, they will be.
So in 2023, the waste to energy incinerator in
Oh, wow.
Doral
Yes.
burnt.
Mm.
And it's just amazing that one that happened. And at that point, they were, I think, incinerating 30 or 40% of the total waste, the rest going to South Dade landfill plus some other ones. So the county has been kicking this down.
They have been.
Down the street.
They don't have much time, Michael. They only got about 2 years
But
left
I
on
don't
the
think
landfill.
anybody wants to be responsible for it.
Correct.
When I looked at it, it's almost barbaric what we are doing. We are taking, spending $500 million a year, burying it up in the middle of the state besides here. My God, this is 2025. And I said earlier, there's my grandson holding up some trash. I found this in the water, Grandpa.
Yep.
I'm thinking, what else can we do? We know about a third of the trash is food and landscaping, right? What do we do with that? I was so frustrated because we do a show every week on solid waste. We went out, my wife went out and bought a little composter to see how it worked. In the house, it's perfect. You put in everything except for steak bones. It dehydrates it, does not smell. It essentially turns it into dirt.
Correct.
Right? What are we going to do here in Dade County to address this?
We are so far behind. I'll tell you
No,
because
we're
in
so
Europe,
far behind.
in
no,
Europe,
no.
oh, they're they have it.
Interestingly enough, the current White House administration has an environmental working group, and I'm now talking with them. There are some very innovative solutions to all of this. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to go to Nashville. Apparently there is a company there that's using high new innovative technology to address some of these things. I think we're going to have to get smart because we only have 2 years left on the landfill. That's my understanding. So
you mean the South Dade landfill?
yes, we're like running out of time here.
Mhm.
So, we don't have the luxury to sit around and think this through. We're going to have to see what is out there, what kind of technology is out there that's going to help us really address our garbage. Because let me tell you something, it's only going to get worse as more and more people move to Florida, and look, they're all coming to Miami-Dade. I know that's so. What's going on in New York politically as well is going to impact Miami-Dade. The elections for mayor in New York City have already begun an exodus. People are calling realtors. The realtors
Yes.
are telling me people are calling already ready to move businesses, move homes. So that means, I always say, oh gosh, that means more traffic, more needs like
Yes.
garbage. How are we going to
Housing.
handle this?
Yeah.
Housing, everything is on the table, and we've got to act quickly. So we've got to research what's out there, and we got to try things because we don't have time. Look, there was a bill this session on the incinerator, on the waste to energy facility, and it failed. But it was trying to address this issue of where do we put it, because Doral doesn't want it, right? Nobody wants it.
Nobody wants it.
And I don't disagree, but where are we going to put it? We can't put it in the Everglades because that's the only place where you wouldn't have people, complaining about where it's at location. So we have to really now research what technology is out there. What are other people doing? Because right now the clock is ticking, and that has me nervous.
And I got to tell you something. We need to go not in the United States. We must go to Europe.
100%. They have all kinds of new
They-
modalities. I know.
I'm telling you, we are so far behind.
We are so behind.
Let's talk
in the
about
United
recycling.
States.
County has a recycling plan. They come to your house every 2 weeks. Somewhere between 40 and 70%, depending on which figure you want to believe, is contaminated that never gets recycled.
Correct.
So the
Mhm.
homeowner's putting into the blue container and
They don't rinse
not
anything.
knowing.
Honestly, there's no rules here. I call it. They feel
Yeah.
good about putting something in the recycling bin, but is it the right thing that needs to go in the recycling bin?
And again, I meet with every week somebody from solid waste. So I've learned a little more, and
Wow.
I've gotten
Yeah.
a little more frustrated.
I bet.
They also have the recycling police. They go out and look in your container.
Okay.
And
How
if
much
you-
is that costing us?
If you are not doing what you're supposed to do, you're going to get a citation 3 times, and after you're going to get a ticket. Let me see if I have this right. Nobody cares, and now you're going to punish them for trying. They are missing a public relations and a marketing plan to say, folks, this is what you need to do. And here's the confusing thing. You can put pizza boxes in there now if it's only lightly soiled.
Okay, but what's the
lightly
definition?
soiled?
That's, I always
I'm
say,
thinking,
what's
I'm
the
in my
definition
house.
of that
this
term?
one-
Is that lightly soiled? But to whose definition?
yes.
You
So
might think it's
yes.
lightly
we have
soiled, and I'll think it's
all
really
of
dirty.
that is so confusing, and people,
Yeah.
I recycle. I said, well, so tell me what you do. Contaminated. And from what I understand, they go through and they, if the boxes are contaminated, that everything around it
But
goes into the trash, not to
but that
recycle.
makes, as somebody like me, so frustrated, you give up.
Yes.
You go, forget
Yes,
it. Everything
you do,
goes in
because
the garbage.
nothing is done in collaboration.
Correct.
Instead of stopping and giving them a list of, you have like a list and just let them know, we went through the recycling bin and we found this and this. Those unfortunately are not. So in the future, I mean, it's how we engage people.
Mhm.
They're either going to lose interest or they're going to get interested.
I hope that
unfortunately.
somebody that got a ticket gives me a call.
I hope so.
Because I
Maybe
want to
so.
have them over here to see how they really feel about trying to participate.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Everglades, all right?
Oh, wow.
So
Mm.
Susan and I and Grant have come from a lot of animals. We were very involved with animals, and we understand that the pythons have essentially killed all the two-legged,
Yes, taken
all the
over.
four-legged
Taken
stuff.
over.
When I see the once a year the python
The annual
hunt,
python hunt.
all right?
But that's not doing anything.
I mean, how many can we find? And
You
you
can't
only
find
have so
them.
many people that are hunting.
I
so,
know.
yeah.
Is there a solution to that?
I do not know. I mean, I went out. I remember when we announced the python hunt, I went out that day for the announcement and saw a couple of people interested in hunting pythons. And I said, do we even know how many we have? What would it take? Would we have to hunt them every single day?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You know who I would ask, quite frankly, is my Miccosukee tribe. They know how to do this.
Of course
Why
they
haven't we
do.
why haven't we asked the people who live off the land and have had to deal with this? I don't know. We always come up with suggestions when I think, look, they're right down the street.
The
Let's
obvious.
ask the chairman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
the big elephant in the room
Yeah.
is Alligator.
Alcatraz. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Look, I mean, we didn't know anything about it. I mean, I can tell you as a House member, I was not informed. I learned from the newspapers what was happening there, and so it's not the legislature that has been involved. It's been more the governor and the county, obviously, because and I guess both counties, Collier and Miami-Dade, right? We don't know anything much about it. They have issued an invitation to members of Congress and state legislators to go visit this Saturday, so that maybe to appease the voices that said that no one is being let in to see it. So I think that that's a good step in the right direction. But I don't know anything about it.
So
Where would
Representative-
you like to see if it was moved? Let's just say, where would you?
There's so
Think so.
much land. The governor's thinking about opening one up in Northeast Florida and one in Northwest Florida, where there is much more land that is not highly sensitive, if you will, environmentally
Mhm.
sensitive. I mean, if we're to collaborate with the federal government, I think there are other places where we could have put it that would not have outraged most people in terms of conditions and environmental impact, right? But again, we were not involved, which is interesting.
From what I understand, the county has 2 positions. Shouldn't be doing it, but here, we're going to sign off on some stuff. So we have both those conversations going on. My big concern is supposedly those temporary housing are hurricane proof up to numbered this second thing.
Well, I don't know, because it flooded the
Yes.
day after it opened. It flooded. Those are very low lands. We know this. We could have asked the Miccosukes there too. I mean, they are
Yes.
very aware of of how nature changes, even with a rainstorm.
So if we had a hurricane coming, it was level 2, is that what it's called?
Mhm.
Right? You and I would be in our homes with our hurricane shutters on.
We would be.
All right? Got our generators ready to go and the food filled, the refrigerator filled with food. So here we have going to be 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 people. Stay in the tent, right? Regardless of where you are on that.
Correct.
That is just so humane to subject these people
Inhumane.
Well,
to the potential of this fear that's coming in.
Well, I don't know. One, I don't know how long. I don't know anything about the process, right? I don't know how they get there. How long are they there? Do they see a magistrate there?
Yep.
And then are they transported? Are they then deported from there, or do they go somewhere else? But I have news for you. We evacuate our correctional facilities when there's a hurricane. Okay. And these are built with concrete, right? Because we understand that human life has value, and we can't risk having a prisoner or a staff member, harmed in any way because of a natural disaster. I don't know how they're going to address that over there, because I can tell you that a tent probably won't stand much after the first category wins. So I don't know.
If the powers to be would say, hey, this is what we're going to do when the hurricanes come, and just let people know. But imagine, all right, the fear of these people.
No.
Right?
But there's even more fears, right? Is getting sick out there, right? There's no medical care other than primary care facility is there with nurses and all. But if you really get very, very sick, they've got to transport you to a hospital. And the nearest hospital, I believe, is HCA Kendall. So, there's just, look, it's another complex and complicated issue. Yeah. I understand people have arrived here illegally and that we are attempting to solve that problem, right? But while we solve it, I think we have to be proud of the way we solve it, right? And so I'm hopeful that we will learn some lessons very quickly here, and that maybe we change the way we approach this.
We have about 5 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about your connection to Judaism.
So I have 3 Chabad synagogues in my district. One on Key Biscayne, and obviously one in Brickell, the Rock Shul, which is really the principal one in the heart of my district. And when I was running for office 3 years ago, a friend of mine who is a member of the Rock Shul connected me to the rabbis there and to the community. And it has a very large young Jewish professional group. And I began to go to show support for them, because I've always had this very almost unexplainable connection to the Jews, whether they be in where I grew up in Fort Myers, or friends that I have made along my journey in life. And I just, it was almost as if there was a perfect storm, because shortly after I was elected, a year later, we had the October 7th massacre take place in Israel. And I felt this urging to stand up and be counted in different ways. I obviously have used my legislative voice to be very clear that I am very unapologetically pro-Israel.
And you're not Jewish.
And I'm not Jewish. No, I was raised Catholic and very much Catholic. So went to the University of Notre Dame. There's no reason to think that I would be anything but Catholic. But there is this connection, and it is deep-rooted in me that takes me back to a place where I feel like this is my role. And I must tell you, it's funny. Many of the young Jewish professionals at the Rock Shul, because I will go to Shabbat as often as I can, because the rabbis would like me to speak and remind people that in Florida, anti-Semitism is absolutely not tolerated in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, DeSantis.
Yes. And honestly, I do it because I can't believe that even saying that gives people a level of comfort. And if I can do that with my presence and my voice, then I will continue to do it. But I'm a real fighter. I'm fearless on every level. So imagine I would be fearless here. And I took my first trip to Israel last summer, and nobody thought that was safe. And I was never safer, to be honest with you. I felt so safe. I'm more unsafe in Brickell than I am in Tel Aviv or in Haifa, or even going south to the kibbutzes near Gaza. So I got a firsthand look at what I'd always known. I'd been a student of the Holocaust for years, and I thought that was unspeakable evil. This too is the exact same story. And I felt that this rise in anti-Semitism, not only in America, but across the world, seemed awfully familiar. And I can't tell you why, because it's just like it was weird. And I said, and I tell people this, when I go to the shul, I say, listen, wake up. This is like 1940 in the making. And if you don't get smart, and if you fall asleep like many Jews did in that period of time, because it was unthinkable. No one could ever have thought in the late 30s, early 40s, that any Jew would have his business taken from him, his education, not be able to be educated, and then be hauled into a ghetto and then finally into a concentration camp. That was unthinkable. And more so within the religious community, to be honest with you, because Rabbi Felig from the Coconut Grove shul said to me, had we spoken up as religious people more so then, maybe we would have been in a different place. And I don't disagree with him. I think he's very brave. And I think all of my rabbis in my district are super brave. But I also feel very strongly that voices like mine are imperative in this discussion. You can say it all day long as Jews, and guess what? It'll sound self-serving. But when I say it, when I have absolutely nothing to lose, right? Then the conversation changes. And we need more people like me to say what I say, which is there's no way that we will tolerate anything like this ever, ever, ever again. And I can say it because I have so much history in my head about what happened.
Or maybe in the next session, people will speak up.
Yeah.
So as we get this wrapped up,
Thank
I know
you very
there-
much, by the way.
Susan,
It makes me feel.
No, you know what it makes me feel when I hear things like that? Because after I speak at a shul or at a Jewish event, and people come up and say thank you, it's hard for me to understand how impactful my position is to you. It really is. I think to myself, I'm just saying what I think everybody should say, right? That we won't allow it, that you'll have to come through me to get to you, and I mean it.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that it means something to you. Really, I'm grateful.
Thank you.
I'll do much more of it, knowing that.
So two things. I know that you've had mentors and people that have helped you along your way. Would you like to talk to them right there? Look at the blue camera. Look right.
Oh gosh, I'll probably get emotional. I've been really grateful to have people who believed in me. And also for all of you that have been, because so many of you are still here with us and continue to mentor me. You just need to know that I'm a fighter. My voice counts as the voice for many who have no voice or very little voice. My job that you've instilled in me is to really do my job. It's not about me, it's about us. And I feel very strongly that I'm in the right place to do the job that you have mentored me into, and I'm really grateful.
State Representative Vicki Lopez, thank you so much for being here.
Love you both
I love
so
your wife,
much.
Susan.
Oh, I know.
It's all good. Let's look at the red camera over there.
Thank you.
Wow, here we
Thank
go.
you.
All right, we're going to look at the red camera over there. Folks, thank you for joining us. Remember, stand up for the things that you believe in, and take care of your family.